TIAN X Science is where science meets the unknown. And my name's TIAN. I'm from China.
There was once a queen in ancient Egyptian history whom someone spent 3,000 years trying to completely erase. Yet no one expected that a statue missing one eye would bring all the secrets back. On December 6, 1912, under the scorching Egyptian sun, with temperatures hitting 38 degrees Celsius, fine dust filled the air, making every breath feel gritty. German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt was standing at an excavation site in Amarna. Just then, workers lifted a limestone bust from the sand. Its painted surface was as vibrant as if it had been completed yesterday. One eye was inlaid with natural rock crystal, while the other was perpetually missing. At that very moment, Borchardt wrote a sentence in his diary that would be quoted continuously for over a century. "No words can describe her. You must see her with your own eyes." He knew he had discovered an extraordinary artifact. In 2010, a genetics research team led by Zahi Hawass conducted DNA testing on several mummies unearthed in the Valley of the Kings. This included a young male mummy from tomb KV55 and a female mummy known as the Young Lady from tomb KV35. The results were subsequently published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and one sentence drew widespread attention. Tutankhamun's parents were full siblings, and the woman known as the Young Lady was his mother. Based on analysis by some researchers, certain clues are even thought to potentially point to Nefertiti herself. If this hypothesis holds true, then Nefertiti and Akhenaten might not have merely been husband and wife, but also biological siblings, and Tutankhamun may have been born of this incestuous marriage. Of course, this identity deduction remains controversial, with no unified conclusion. But if more evidence emerges to support this view, our understanding of family relationships in the 18th dynasty of Egypt might need a complete reassessment. What is truly chilling is that there is a mummy in this story that should not even exist. In February 1898, in the Valley of the Kings, French archaeologist Victor Leray entered a burial chamber later designated as KV35. The air inside was heavy, as if frozen. Oxygen was so thin that even candles struggled to burn. Lauret ignited a magnesium powder flash, and the scene that appeared before him was unforgettable. In a side chamber, 3 mummies were placed against the wall. No sarcophagi, no inscriptions, just 3 bodies lying quietly on bare stone slabs. One belonged to a woman, around 35 years old. Her left arm was bent over her chest, a posture very similar to that of a buried pharaoh, while her right arm extended naturally by her side. However, her face was severely mutilated. Thousands of years ago, someone had viciously smashed her cheeks with a heavy object. Even before mummification, her chest cavity had been cut open and her mouth destroyed. Who did this? And why would they so thoroughly obliterate a lifeless face? Local workers managing the excavation whispered a word among themselves: the cursed one. They refused to touch the mummy. An old man named Ahmed Garagar even spat on the ground and walked away. Lauret wrote in his diary that he could not understand their reasons, attributing it entirely to local superstition. Afterward, the mummy was measured, photographed, and recorded, then left back in the tomb for exactly 112 years, almost entirely ignored. During this time, various speculations arose. In 1910, British Egyptologist Grafton Elliott Smith suggested she might be Queen Tianan, Tutankhamun's grandmother. Others guessed she was just an unnamed royal concubine. French scholars quietly mentioned another name, Kia, another of Akhenaten's queens. But no one could determine her true identity. Her facial damage was so severe that any identity deduction felt like divining the future from broken pottery shards. So this mystery remained dormant for nearly a century, until 2010, when researchers extracted DNA samples from the mummy's femur for testing. The results showed an extremely close genetic relationship with Tutankhamun. Researchers thus inferred she was very likely Tutankhamun's mother. Imagine a family tree, like the ones hanging on an ordinary family's refrigerator, except here, the father and mother likely shared a close blood relationship. As for this mother, a controversial view suggests she might even be ancient Egypt's most famous beauty, Nefertiti, the figure still world-renowned today for her bust, whose image is printed on mugs sold in the Berlin Museum gift shop. However, this identification remains hotly debated. Egyptologists like Marc Gabolde from the University of Montpellier and Aidan Dodson from the University of Bristol believe the young lady in KV35 is not Nefertiti. They propose this mummy could be Nefertiti's sister, Queen Kia, or another unidentified princess. To this day, the debate is ongoing. What is truly intriguing is that the world-famous Nefertiti bust, housed in the Neues Museum in Berlin, cannot provide DNA evidence itself. Because it has a hollow structure made of limestone and painted stucco, it contains no biological tissue. Therefore, we cannot extract DNA samples from it to confirm her true identity. Perhaps the real answer is still buried beneath the yellow sands of Egypt. Or maybe people have already found the answer but still cannot fully confirm it. And the real question follows. If the mummy in tomb KV35 really is Nefertiti, where is the tomb she was originally meant to be buried in? What ultimately happened to the queen who left her name in official history? And why did someone in ancient times deliberately erase her name, even clearing her traces from walls and historical records one by one? Around 1345 BC, Akhenaten, known today as the city of Amarna, rose from the center of the desert. Built almost from scratch in just 5 years, the city boasted around 100,000 residents, broad avenues, magnificent palaces, and open-air temples. This was the capital during the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten and Nefertiti, the new capital built by the pharaoh who abolished the worship of the Egyptian pantheon, keeping only the worship of the sun god Aten. Yet just 17 years later, the city was suddenly abandoned. All residents left, and the palaces were gradually buried by yellow sand. The names of Akhenaten and Nefertiti were chiseled away from stone stelae, their cartouches completely obliterated, and the faces, chests, and inscriptions of their statues systematically destroyed. It was as if someone deliberately wanted them to vanish completely from history. In the winter of 1907, American archaeologist Theodore Davis was excavating a burial designated as KV55 in the Valley of the Kings. About 20 meters underground, a narrow tomb passage was stifling and oppressive. A wooden coffin lay in the burial chamber. The face on the coffin lid had been artificially destroyed, and the name on it scraped down to the bare wood. Inside the coffin lay a young male mummy, only about 25 years old. Davis was highly confused by this. He initially believed he had found the remains of Queen TIAN and announced this to the public. A year later, anatomist Grafton Elliott Smith studied the mummy and published a brief report with a very clear conclusion. This was not a female, but a male. At the time, a local tomb guard named Yusuf Dali told a reporter a legend he heard from his grandfather. He said this tomb buried a faceless pharaoh, a person even the gods refused to accept. The reporter just smiled and wrote the story down. Back in 1907, such rumors were merely material for the novelty columns of newspapers. However, 103 years later, DNA samples from this mummy were sent to a laboratory in Cairo. The test results made Zahi Hawass sound momentarily emotional at the press conference. Studies showed this mummy was very likely Tutankhamun's father, and simultaneously the full brother of the young lady in tomb KV35. This means Tutankhamun's parents were very likely full siblings. The boy pharaoh wearing the golden mask, whom almost every child recognizes, was perhaps born from a consanguineous marriage. If up until now you still thought you understood Tutankhamun's story, you might want to think again. So who exactly is this man in tomb KV55? This is precisely one of the most controversial questions in all of Egyptology. Judging from skull analysis, he was around 25 years old when he died, though some believe he might have been closer to 35. Different research methods yield inconsistent ages. But according to official historical records, Akhenaten ruled for about 17 years and should have been nearly 40 when he died. The two simply do not seem to align. This implies that while the man in tomb KV55 belonged to the Amarna royal family, he might not necessarily be Akhenaten himself. Others speculate he could be another young royal member, such as Nefertiti's brother, or the brother of the young lady, assuming these two are not the same person. Currently, one of the names frequently discussed in academic circles is Smenkhkare. This mysterious pharaoh supposedly ruled Egypt briefly between Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. Some believe he ruled for only 2 years, while others think the time was even shorter. Information about him is extremely scarce. There is no confirmed tomb belonging to him, no explicit statues of him, and even his complete chronological sequence is difficult to sort out. He is almost like a ghost in history. What truly shocked many researchers was a study presented in 2014 by British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves. After analyzing inscriptions on sarcophagi from the Amarna period, he proposed a hypothesis. Smenkhare might not have been another male pharaoh, but could potentially be Nefertiti herself. During her husband's later years, she adopted a new royal name, became a co-regent, and continued to rule Egypt as pharaoh after Akhenaten's death. According to this view, Nefertiti later ruled as a male pharaoh, wearing the pharaonic crown, donning the false beard symbolizing power, and using full pharaonic titles. This means she might have passed away earlier than traditionally believed. Think of it like a family business, originally managed by the father. After his passing, it should be handed over to the son. But if there is no son, only a wife, she might need to take on the role of a male heir to continue running the enterprise. Meanwhile, the damaged face of the young lady mummy in tomb KV35 has also sparked much discussion. Some believe this might not just be natural decay. Researchers have suggested it could be linked to an ancient Egyptian practice of erasing memories. In ancient Egyptian belief, destroying the face of the deceased meant destroying their soul. Without an intact face, the dead could not breathe or eat in the afterlife, nor could they communicate with the gods. If this interpretation holds, it seems someone deliberately wanted to prevent this woman from ever entering the afterlife. The perpetrators were likely not foreign enemies, but possibly insiders from the royal family itself. They lived in the same palace, walked the same corridors, and dined at the same table. The story seems to grow even more complex here. The 2010 DNA study also revealed another lesser-known finding. Research indicated that the mother of the young lady in KV35 is believed to be Queen Ta, and the male mummy in KV55 shares the exact same parents. In other words, the two are likely full siblings. If more evidence in the future proves the young lady is indeed Nefertiti, then many genealogical theories popular over the past century might need a complete re-evaluation. She might not be the daughter of the Vizier I as long believed, but could possess a more direct royal bloodline, potentially even sharing a close consanguineous relationship with her own husband. Of course, all of this remains academic speculation and has not formed a unified conclusion. To this day, the archives of the Cairo Museum reportedly still hold some relevant samples. Over at the Neues Museum in Berlin, the famous Nefertiti bust still sits quietly behind bulletproof glass. Perhaps one day, new testing technologies will completely verify all of this, or perhaps entirely overturn these hypotheses. But as of now, humanity still lacks a final answer. In February 2010, at the Egyptian Museum near Tahrir Square in Cairo, Zahi Hawass, then head of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, announced a DNA test result to the media. Cameras from the BBC, National Geographic, and Discovery Channel captured the moment. As the results were read out, the room erupted in applause. The next day, media outlets worldwide ran headlines, declaring the mystery of Tutankhamun's origins solved. Yet just a month later, a quiet controversy began to emerge. Independent genetics research teams from Switzerland, Germany, and the United States published a response in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Their wording was polite, but their stance was clear. They argued that the samples carried a risk of contamination, and the STR genetic markers used for testing might not be suitable for ancient DNA. Additionally, Egypt's hot climate could degrade genetic material much faster than in northern regions. Subsequently, Zahi Hawass responded in a television interview, claiming that some foreign scholars were trying to seize control over the narrative of Egyptian history. This academic discussion quickly escalated into an international dispute, and the tests were never independently verified again. A year later, the political landscape in Egypt changed drastically, and Zahi Hawass stepped down. The laboratories conducting the analyses were damaged during the unrest, and some samples subsequently vanished from the records. There is no evidence they were stolen. They simply disappeared from the registry catalog. No one knows where they ultimately went. Imagine a small bakery with only one ancestral recipe. One morning, that recipe suddenly vanishes from the table. Nobody saw what happened, and nobody knows who took it. It just disappeared. The situation with some of the mummy DNA samples is very similar. For the next 12 years, the DNA of Tutankhamun and the young lady in KV35 never underwent another complete, independent international test. The Egyptian authorities consistently and politely rejected applications from universities in Germany and the UK, citing reasons such as protecting the mummies, respecting the deceased, and internal management protocols. At this point, we must speak frankly. Many things still lack definitive answers. Reeves' theory that Nefertiti later became Pharaoh Smenkhare remains merely a prominent academic hypothesis. Identifying the young lady in KV-35 as Nefertiti herself is equally controversial, with Egyptologists like Catherine Martin and Aidan Dodson maintaining different viewpoints. However, one DNA analysis result still garners widespread attention today. Tutankhamun's parents were very likely full siblings. This finding prompts a re-examination of the complex royal marriage structures of the 18th dynasty. During that era, marriages between siblings, uncles and nieces, and even fathers and daughters appeared in historical records. This was not driven by emotional factors in the modern sense, but rather to maintain royal power and bloodline continuity. The ancient Egyptian royal family believed that sacred blood must be kept within the family. Yet the price of this practice likely manifested in their descendants. Tutankhamun passed away at the age of 18. He had a deformity in his left foot, necrosis in his toe bones, and suffered a fractured thigh shortly before his death. Researchers also found traces of the malaria parasite in his remains, and believe he suffered from health issues like a weakened immune system. This boy Pharaoh, who inherited the mighty empire of ancient Egypt, had to rely on walking sticks during his lifetime. Archaeologists found over 130 walking canes in his tomb. For a long time, people could not understand why a young pharaoh needed so many canes. Now, some researchers believe he could not walk normally without them. Some scholars view this as a potential consequence of prolonged inbreeding. Biology does not alter its rules for royalty. When closely related genes repeatedly combine, the risk of genetic diseases increases. The immune system can be compromised, the probability of skeletal abnormalities rises, and the risk of infant mortality climbs. Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun, who according to current research was also his half-sister, had 2 pregnancies, but both ended in stillbirths. Archaeologists later found 2 infant mummies in Tutankhamun's tomb. Placed inside 2 small sarcophagi, they quietly accompanied the boy pharaoh. With no legitimate heirs surviving, the 18th dynasty finally came to an end. What is truly worth considering is this. If the young lady in tomb KV-35 really is Nefertiti, then what we see is not just the world-famous beautiful face in the Berlin Museum. That might be a mother who personally watched her children suffer from illness and witnessed her daughters pass away. She gave birth to 6 daughters, some of whom did not live to adulthood. Some also hypothesize that in her final years, she might have even worn the pharaoh's crown, trying to sustain this crumbling dynasty as a male ruler. And after her death, the new pharaoh and the reinstated priesthood of the old gods might have tried to erase every trace she left behind. Her statues were smashed, her face deliberately destroyed. According to ancient Egyptian beliefs, this meant the deceased could not breathe normally in the afterlife. Her name was painstakingly chiseled away from inscriptions. In a way, they almost succeeded. For over 3,000 years, Nefertiti barely appeared in any official royal records. Until 1912, a German archaeologist accidentally dug up a limestone bust missing an eye from the yellow sand. It was later transported to Berlin, kept in storage for a long time, and only officially displayed to the public decades later. Today, almost everyone in the world recognizes this face. The greatest irony of history might lie right here. What does this all mean? The answer might be simple. The history we study today is not necessarily everything that truly happened. It is merely the portion lucky enough to be preserved, the parts that were not smashed, burned, or artificially rewritten. Every name in our textbooks is just a survivor, and every face in a museum is merely a fragment left behind by history. Beneath the yellow sands, countless unknown pharaohs, queens, and forgotten children may still lie buried. So the next time you stand before a glass display case in a museum, gazing at that beautiful sculpted stone face, perhaps you should think about it. Behind that face, there might hide smashed statues, children lost to inbreeding, cursed tombs, and that Cairo laboratory that has remained silent for 12 years. So, what does this 3,000-year-old Egyptian saga mean for us today here on TIAN Science? To me, the greatest lesson hidden beneath the sands of Amarna is a profound reminder of our own humanity and the fragility of truth. We are so accustomed to viewing historical figures as perfect, untouchable icons, a flawless bust of a beautiful queen, or the glittering golden mask of a boy king. But when science peels back those layers of gold and stone, it reveals real people who bled, grieved, and suffered. It teaches us to look beyond the surface. History isn't just an objective list of facts in a textbook. It's a mosaic of fragmented truths, heavily edited and curated by those who survived. It reminds us to always question the narratives we are fed, to think critically, and to realize that sometimes the most important stories are the ones someone desperately tried to erase. But hey, that is just my perspective. All the narratives, reconstructions, and theories I've shared in this video are based on my personal synthesis and analysis of available data. Because history and science are constantly evolving, what I've presented today could be entirely right, or it could be completely wrong. So, I want to turn the question over to you. What do you think about all of this? Do you believe the young lady is truly Nefertiti? Do you think the DNA results revealing royal inbreeding are the absolute truth, or is there a deeper, hidden agenda we haven't uncovered yet? True or false, right or wrong? I want to hear it all. Please leave your thoughts down below so we can discuss and debate together. Also, our TIAN science community is growing so fast, and I'm always amazed by how diverse it is. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching this video from right now? I'll be hanging out reading your insights, so I'll see you in the comments section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and as always, stay curious.